All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Chase Most podcast. Taping this early on a Friday. Go Big Orange Friday is what the folks are calling it. A lot of folks are calling it, whether that's at Litton's, whether that's Savelli's. They all know Go Big Orange Friday means Chase Thomas, not Ethan Stone this week, and Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Ryan, good morning, sir. How are you?
Doing well. Just trying to deal with the fact that I'm not in Omaha covering a Tennessee College World Series game today. I got my 2021 College World Series shirt on to try to keep the vibes good. But no, doing well. A lot more free time this week than I anticipated, but all good over here on this front.
I've written a lot about it this week. Your brother, I think, was one who reached
Yeah.
out to me about it. He liked it, so shout out to the Schumpert family. They're basically my family at this point. Get engaged at Tommy Schumpert Park. Ryan's in the pod. Grant's a fan of the program and the reader. So we're just the Schumperts and the Thomases are becoming one and the same. It seems like.
Yeah, no, it was. I kind of did a double take when I first saw his tweet responding to it because like I
Mm.
knew he followed you and listened to the podcast some, but I'd never seen him interact with you. And but no, I mean his comments were on, which were basically saying that your comments were on. It was a very good piece. I'd encourage anyone to check it out. And I was kind of asked doing a radio hit yesterday a question kind of similar to what you were getting at. What will you remember about the Tennessee baseball team and what you have to remember? Kind of the missed opportunity. I don't think that's will be my lasting image of what I remember. You know, getting to watch them play 45 games in person this year. Certainly a special season, and you got to be able to enjoy the ride. And I think that was kind of one of the big the cruxes of your piece.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was. I think it's just important to. It's hard to have that perspective on Sunday afternoon after everything happened. Like I went for a run on campus right after, just because I was like, all right, I'm frustrated. And seeing the tweets, like the rage tweets I saw, where I was like, nope, not getting fired today, not doing this. So it was a good reminder of like just social media, how toxic it is, and just how venomous it was towards Tennessee fans. And I think, look, like we can't control what other people feel about this program or feel about Vitello or feel about anything else. The crux of the piece was just that, like, I would not change any of that. I don't think Vitello would change any of that. I don't think anyone on this team would change any of that. I don't think this administration, this fan base would change any of that. And I think you had to just be in the building where it's like I'm not certain we'll ever see a Tennessee team that dominant ever again in baseball. Like, I don't know if that will ever happen. And that's something that's super cool to be like, dude, I was in the building for the majority of those games. Like, it's so much more fun. Like, I have so many different memories. I have so many different people. Like, I just remember like kids just being like, did they hit another one? Or like kids just being excited about Mike Honcho and seeing the Mike Honcho jerseys and seeing all these guys just become like superheroes to them in person. And I think that's something, if you're not in the building, a lot of folks, they just craft these narratives about these guys. And that was something that I really wanted to hit on. It's just how much they hate these people that they don't know, these kids that they don't know. And it's embarrassing. Like, I won't lie. There were some really, really embarrassing takes that came out of Tennessee's loss on Sunday. And I found myself extremely grateful for like being able to see what this team was, and really just the last 2 years in person, and how incredible this whole lineup was. And just going into games where you're like, man, it's already over in the second inning. It's over in the top of the first. It's over like the 100 and whatever it was. I don't even remember now. Was it like 161 or 141 home runs, giving up 141 runs total, like stuff like
Yeah.
that, where you're like, that's just silly. And being around for that in person and just seeing the domination and the despair on other teams' faces when Tennessee just buries you and buries you and buries you, where you could take it for granted if if you're not careful. And I made sure throughout this whole season that I didn't take it for granted. I think a lot of people just thought, when you said, oh, they're the best baseball team of all time, college baseball team, whatever, it's like, and I mentioned this in the piece, Gonzaga was written about that a bunch in 2021, where they were just beating the crap out of everybody. The numbers loved them. Everybody loved them. But there was also this understanding that you still have to get a lot of luck to win it all come March. Like, Mark Few is still an elite coach. That 2021 Gonzaga team is still probably the best team in college basketball. They still didn't win. It's extremely difficult to run that kind of gauntlet and do that. In college baseball, is different. And I don't think Vitello or anyone in this program ever thought, because we dominated everybody in the SEC, because we did not lose a home series the whole year until the Notre Dame series, that we were going to win it all, that we were going to be like, they're aware that no one's won the College World Series as a number one overall seed since '99. Like, everyone knows that. The last 3 years now, they haven't even gotten out of the Super Regional. So it's like, it's not this unique thing, and they knew what they were fighting against and going against history. And it was, what do you want, to just change their perspective and change how they are because it's going to be more difficult and they're going against that? No, it's like, if it happens, awesome. But guess what? They were still a dominant baseball team, and they still were probably, like, I think, if you look at all the league awards, like, obviously Vitello did something right. He won Coach of the Year. You look up and down the list, freshman All-Americans, everything, just MVPs everywhere, all SEC players. And I think about all of that, and I'm like, no, they could be Gonzaga. They could be this best team that just did not win a title, but that's okay because that's baseball. So the crowd who were like, oh, they ate some humble pie, also overlooked that that's baseball part of it, which is, this is not Alabama situation where when Alabama's the best team in college football, a lot of those peak Alabama teams, you knew that they were going to win the championship, because if college football is built that way, where if you are the best and you built your Death Star, you are going to win the title. Georgia's defense was a Death Star that could not be beaten. Tennessee, in that kind of setup, could not have been beaten. Like, if this baseball team had to set up like college football, then that's how it happens. But college baseball is different, man. You cannot have any let-ups, any bad weekends ever at the right possible time, and that's just what happened. I don't know. I feel fine about all of it. Where are you at?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head on a lot of that, and I'll start with that last point. And this even takes out the baseball aspect of it, because obviously baseball is a game of variance far more than really any other sport, certainly far more than football. But to win it all in football, you got to win 2 games in the NCAA tournament, in the playoff. You got to win a minimum of 10 in college baseball, and it can be, I guess, 12 at the max you can win and win it all. So it's just completely different, and we've talked about it on here that all these teams, really good teams that have not made it out of the super regionals. And I thought that was kind of something that I think all year, when the debate of is this Tennessee team the best college baseball team ever was going on, I thought was so hard to attack it, is because so many of the teams that you look at what they did and it's like, wow, that's incredible. That's the resume of the greatest team of all time. They didn't win it all. Rarely did they win it all. So I think that makes it even more hard to judge, because if you're going to be the greatest of all time, you have to win it all. And if you look at the accolades of those best teams that have ever won it all, the accolades are a lot less than a lot of teams that didn't win it all. A lot of teams that didn't even make it to the College World Series. And I think that would be one thing that I would add too. I think for Tennessee fans, it would have been a lot easier to deal with that loss or deal with getting eliminated if it had happened in Omaha. I think making it back to the College World Series would have been another great achievement that at the end of the day, even if Tennessee doesn't win it all, you win the SEC regular season, you win the SEC tournament, you make it to Omaha. There's really not anything you can complain about, anything that you came up short of the end goal, and that would be true. But I think I would add to your point about, everybody that was taking the chance to jump on Tennessee, which, you knew that was coming. I remember thinking back from March, the moment whenever this Tennessee season ends, unless they're lifting up the trophy, they're going to be hated on, and I think that's what I would.
But they would have been hated on even if they won the trophy, and that was something I also mentioned. It's like, do you think people would have just changed their tune and been like, "Well deserved, Tennessee. You proved us all wrong. Great job. Happy for this fan base." No, happy for Vitello. That never would have happened.
No, it definitely wouldn't have, and I meant more in just of everybody. Twitter was a complete.
Yeah.
Everybody, let's come together and let's crap on Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And if Tennessee lost in 3 games in the College World Series championship, playing really well, that still would have happened.
Yep.
Those people, and this is kind of what you were getting at, saying they never would have changed their mind. These people, it didn't matter to them when Tennessee lost. They were going to jump on Tennessee whenever they lost. So that wasn't surprising. I knew it was coming. I got my work done on Sunday night, scheduled a bunch of tweets for that night and in the morning, and then I just deleted Twitter off my phone for 24 hours. So
that's a good thing to do, man.
Yeah, there's nothing I need to see. Kind of like you're saying, anything I saw was just gonna make me upset from the lack of actual perspective on those tweets. But hey, Tennessee rubbed it in a lot of people's faces when they won this year. I understand why people wanted to rub it back when they fell in the tournament.
The best part, though, is that they're going to be in the mix. Like, that is what I love, is that Tennessee baseball is so much fun. We're getting renovations. That's happening. It's a great time to be in Knoxville. Like, everything's moving up. Like, Tennessee all across the board, like on the academic and football calendar, basketball calendar, the baseball calendar, women's basketball calendar, women's softball. Like, there is so much there's just so many reasons for optimism across the board that you just want to be in the mix in as many things as you possibly can be. And Vitello, now, hate him or love him, he has Tennessee in the mix for the foreseeable future. Like, this is not slowing down. What we've seen the last 2 years is the new status quo in Tennessee. And Tennessee made Omaha last year with a worse team. Like, Tennessee was good last year. They were a very good SEC team. But you saw, like, how many SEC teams just made the College World Series. Like, this is just part of the deal now, that Tennessee is going, some years they might be better than others and might be the best team in the SEC, and they don't make Omaha. Other years they're like the fourth best team in the SEC, and they go deep in Omaha. Like, that's going to be kind of where we're at. And as long as Vitello is running this program, this is not slowing down. We see the recruiting. We see what he's doing in the portal. We see how many guys are coming back this upcoming year, and we'll get into that in a second. But I don't know. I think that's the most important thing, is you want to have a program where you're certain that we're going to be in the mix for a College World Series appearance every single year. And I think that's just kind of where Vitello has now gotten this program, which is the best part about all of this, is that the 2 years that you and I have both experienced with this revitalization is that it's here to stay for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. I kind of have two thoughts on that. The first one, which to me is kind of illustrates how blessed Tennessee fans are to be able to witness what they just witnessed for the past 2 years, and that's the fact that I just graduated a couple weeks ago, 4 years. My first year covering Tennessee was my freshman year, and I got that beat in whatever it would have been, February of 2019, and Tennessee baseball was nothing. I knew Vitello had been there. This was his second year. They did a little bit better in his first year than they had been the few years before, but no expectations for, at that very moment, if you told me Tennessee made the NCAA tournament 2 of the next 4 years, I would have been like, wow, that is absolutely awesome. They made it that first year. The COVID year was obviously the next year. I think that team was plenty talented enough to get to Omaha. I think when you look at the talent level, it was probably somewhere between this year's team and the 2021 team. So to have just the elevation so quickly, and Jesse Simonton, was on 3 Sports now, used to be at VolQuest. He always says a phrase that I think is just really, really smart. The progress isn't always linear.
Mm-hmm.
You go up and down. It's not, building a program's not like this. But through 5 years, Tony Vitello building the program, that's all it's been. All it's been is that. And naturally, we'll have to take some sort of step back next year, but it probably won't be a big one. And I think Tennessee will be a top 10 or top 10, top 5 team in preseason, one of the best 2 or 3 teams again in the SEC. So that really is, I think, kind of keeps it in perspective of just how good this program is, just how quickly it got good. And then the kind of second one, and this is really exactly what you're getting at, in a sport, and it's kind of the same way in basketball, probably a little bit different, but basketball and baseball, in an NCAA tournament, anything can happen. It's crazy breaks, it's unpredictable, and it's just about getting as many cracks at it as you can, having as many talented teams and getting as many runs at it, and eventually you think it's gonna bounce your way. It's gonna break your way. The more times you can get there, the more times you can get to a super regional, the more times you can get to the College World Series. Eventually something's going to go your way. And I mean, you saw that from Mississippi State last year, who I couldn't tell you how many times they've made it to Omaha in the past 10 years, 15 years, but frequently. And obviously they never won a national championship in any sport, let alone baseball. And it finally, in a year that they lost, they went 2-and-out getting run ruled in both games in Hoover, and they had didn't have much momentum going in the NCAA tournament. Things broke the right way, and is exactly what your point was. But with Vitello at the helm, Tennessee is going to be back frequently. They're going to have a lot of really good teams. They're going to have a lot of chances to make it back to the College World Series. They're going to make it back to the College World Series, and if I was a betting man, I'd bet at some point things break their way and they reach that mountaintop.
I would agree. In terms of who comes back, what do you think the lineup, the early lineup looks like. Who do you think? We know Christian Scott's coming back, but outside of that, how do you think the lineup shakes out? Do you think Lawson and Ortega, is it one of the two come back? Like how do you see the early 2023 Tennessee lineup looking?
Okay, well, I'll start with kind of what players I think will stay and go.
Mm.
I think Beck and Gilbert definitely gone. Obviously, we know Russell and Lipsius are gone. I think I put Ortega kind of in the lean towards thinking he's going to be gone category.
Hmm.
I just think with what he did this past year, to me, he was the most underrated player on Tennessee's team, if not the SEC. I thought he was a huge All SEC snub. I think he'll get selected high enough to go. But again, that one's in the it's not a lock like Gilbert and Beck. And then I would say Stevenson and Lawson are the two that I kind of could see going either way. I kind of lean towards thinking they'd be back. Lawson, obviously, the interesting one with bringing in the transfer shortstop from Kansas. I'd be shocked if he's not starting shortstop next year. So, well, what does Lawson want to do? Does he want to move over to second base or third base? I think that's a big question. But when you look at it, I think Blake Burke's going to take that first base spot unless Tennessee can land Tommy White from North Carolina State, which they're in the thick of that one. They're going after him hard, though it does seem like he kind of wants to go back to Florida, where his home state. I don't know how much Florida State's coaching change mixes things up there, but I think you're going to have him. You're going to have Christian Moore is going to factor in there somewhere. And to me, I think the outfield is where it's more interesting because you do have Kyle Booker back. You do, like you said, you have Christian Scott, Jared Dickey, who could potentially be a catcher too, depending on how things shake out there in the transfer portal and his development. But what does Colby Backus, junior college transfer from Walter State, what does he look like? And then Reese Chapman out from Colorado is one of Tennessee's highest rated commits in this year's class, or highest rated signees. Can they keep him out of the draft? Can they get him to school? And if they do, I think he's going to be a guy that's at least going to be competing to earning a lot of reps, and maybe not a starter from day one, but he's talented enough that I think he's in that Christian Moore, Blake Burke role where even if they're not an everyday starter, he's gonna find himself getting a lot of the bats and having a lot of opportunities.
What do we think is going to happen with Chapman? Do you think he's going to stay in the draft, or do you think he's going to be in Tennessee next year?
If I would guess, I'd guess he's going to be at Tennessee.
Okay.
That's kind of the vibes I've gotten from being around it a little bit. But at the same time, anything can happen. Like you go back to last year, there were a lot of guys that they felt better about that ended up staying in the draft, and some guys, Christian Moore and Stevenson, being an example of guys that they were a little skeptical would make it to school, and they did. So it's kind of a crapshoot. You never really know. But if I had a gun to my head, I would say Chapman makes it to Knoxville.
I'm curious what they do with Dickey. Like, that's the wild card with where you put him. And, I mean, you just have to have him somewhere. Like, the bat is just – he's the best all-around hitter. Like, he just is. Like, he works counts. It's just so hard to get out. Like, Jared Dickey, man, is just going to be a pain for everybody for the foreseeable future, and you just have to have his bat in the lineup every day. And I don't know where you play him. Like, that is the toughest part for him because I'm not certain he can be an everyday outfielder.
Yeah, I would question how effective he could, if he's going to be a dominant, fantastic fielder. But I think he can hold up to it. I mean, that's mostly where he was playing. I mean, there was some designated hitter, but that's mostly where he was playing before he got injured. And I didn't think there were any glaring struggles there. I think it's probably different when you get to Hoover, or if you make it to the College World Series when you're playing in a big ballpark. But at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, where in left field you don't have a ton of ground, I certainly think he can hold
True.
his own. But you're right. I mean, it's a massive question of where he fits in because he's going to be in the lineup. Mm-hmm. He is, he's a professional hitter. He is as probably complete as a batter as they have in the lineup. But where he ends up, it's up in the air. I think some of that depends. They had Paul Skeens, the Air Force transfer catcher, on campus this week. Did they land him? If not, I could see it being a pretty tough offseason where they're saying, hey, we need you to do exactly what Evan Russell did last year. And he did a lot of that this year, or this past offseason. He's worked at catcher. He got maybe an inning or two this season earlier in the year before he got hurt. But he's certainly not a natural catcher and would be very much in that Evan Russell mold. But I do think that's an option if they don't land anybody from the portal.
Interesting. I don't think they're going to strike out on like the Air Force kid, the NC State kid, and anyway, like not that many in a row. I think they'll end up with at least one or two of those guys. So that should be interesting. Smith would be a game changer, and it's like, oh, well, what does that mean for Burke? It's like, well, they'll probably take turns DHing and stuff like that. Like, they'll figure it out. Like, I think that will be fine. I think they'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee had like what 13 guys that would start at most SEC
Yeah,
schools this year when everybody was healthy. It changed and it fluctuated as the year went on, but they figured it out. It's stockpile as much talent as you possibly can, and then figure it out once they're all on campus.
absolutely. Vic Burley, no surprise, does not end up at Tennessee. He ends up at Clemson. With Burley off the board, who do you think is most the next man up that Tennessee fans should be aware of on the edge?
I'd say Shandavian and Bradley. I mean, we talked about those two guys back at Rocky Top Palooza. I think that's what it was called. That
Yeah.
big recruiting weekend they had back. I think that's the same weekend of the SEC tournament. He was on campus then. It seems like they have a lot of traction there. And then the other guy, I'd look out for it. And he's a little more versatile where he can play and maybe even beef up and play in the interior and defensive line. But Tamarion McDonald, the Alabama defensive lineman, I believe Phoenix City. He's a guy that Tennessee's in thick on. Maybe not with Bradley. It seems like Tennessee is 1A or 1B. They're right up there at the top. I'm not sure they have quite as much traction with McDonald, but they're in that top group. They hosted him, I believe, for that Rocky Top Palooza weekend, and then again in March. He announced this week that he's going to come for an official visit for the Kentucky game. And probably the most important thing, it's an Alabama kid who it doesn't seem like Alabama's super hard on. And granted, Auburn doesn't have a lot of traction in the recruiting ranks right now, and how can they win the Brian Harsin situation? I mean, he's in a brutal position to be recruiting in, but Auburn doesn't seem to be in the thick of his recruitment either. So it's an Alabama kid that is not leaning towards one of the in-state schools, which is always hard to go in there and beat those two programs out. But it seems like Tennessee, Florida, Michigan State, Penn State, I think in there too with official visits announced. So you kind of lean towards looking at proximity. You would think it'd be hard to get him to Penn State or Michigan State. So that kind of makes you think that a lot of it's going to be a Tennessee or Florida battle. But those are two guys, two top 100 commits that Tennessee's in the thick of for. And I think not getting Burley was a disappointment. But like you said, certainly seemed to be trending that way for a while. And a spot that Tennessee's recruiting really well, especially when you consider the fact that they already have Caleb Herring, top 80, top 75, whatever he is, whatever site you want to choose, defensive end committed. There's a lot of really strong pass rushers that Tennessee's in deep for.
For sure. Christian Conyer and Jalen Smith both have crystal ball predictions now this week for Tennessee. Who are you more excited about?
I'd probably say Christian Conyer, just because I think you look at what Tennessee's recruiting into defensive backfield has been. There's been less, big name blue chip targets, and I do think Conyer, if I'm not mistaken, it's a high 3-star on most sites. But this is a guy that I feel like I've heard this name for a long time now. He's been one of Tennessee's top targets in the defensive backfield, and also, as a Nashville kid, Kentucky's had a lot of success coming into the mid-state in recruiting Nashville, beating out Tennessee for a lot of kids. I mean, you go back to the Wade twins at Summit last year. I believe a receiver Brown maybe from one of the inner city Nashville schools, and they've beaten out Tennessee for a lot of guys. I think a little bit of a sweet revenge for Tennessee to go up into the Bluegrass State and potentially beat out Kentucky for a kid that they want really badly.
I like it. Tennessee basketball getting Texas at home. We were wondering, I think last week, if there would be a big non-conference home game, kind of like Arizona. It's not as big as Arizona, but obviously Tennessee at Texas was one of the most frustrating basketball games last year. That was brutal in the ending, and us overthinking like, should Triple J have taken that shot, and was that the best shot available for Tennessee? Should that have been the call? But that was a wild game. That was intense. An amazing Tennessee comeback. Zakai Ziegler late was sensational. But Tennessee back against Texas in the Big 12 SEC Challenge, the Rick Barnes Bowl. What do you make of Texas coming here?
Yeah, I like the matchup. That was kind of my first thought. I thought that was a fun one, a good matchup, and it's two programs I think are pretty comparable right now. And I think you look at what they did last year. Pretty comparable, pretty similar. Tennessee was probably better for most of the season, but obviously Texas wins that game, and both teams make it to the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament. And obviously that was Chris Beard's first year, and one that was a little inconsistent. I think probably more consistent than a lot of people projected. I mean, what Texas was a top 10 team preseason. I mean, a lot of it was way too early stuff. They were top 5. They were kind of one of the offseason champions last year with all the guys that they got in the transfer portal. But I think it's a matchup that should between two teams that should be pretty comparable this year. Top 15, top 20 teams, and I like the chance for Tennessee to be able to get a little bit of revenge. I mean, I remember Josiah talking after that game about how they really wanted to win that one for Coach Barnes, and it'll be a little bit different. It's not that was the whole ordeal around that game was Rick Barnes returned to Austin first time. It's not gonna. It'll be a storyline this year, but it's not going to be the storyline for the game, which it kind of was last year. But a chance for Tennessee to get a little bit of revenge for Barnes, and I would two more things, I guess. One, it's good that Tennessee gets a premier non-conference game at home, so I'm not complaining about it. But it's just different when it's the SEC Big 12 Challenge and it's the middle of SEC play. And that's kind of what, to me, is disappointing about the schedule. And it's just the nature of college basketball scheduling because you play so many of these non-conference games early in the season. But Tennessee won't have the premier matchup at Thompson-Boling Arena until January. I mean, maybe if their SEC opener is a really good opponent and it's at home, it'll be at the end of December. But it just kind of sucks that you're going to be basically 2 months into the season without a big-time matchup that gets Thompson-Boling Arena rocking. And then I guess the second thing, or the last thing I would add, 100% that was a good shot Tennessee took at the end of the game. You let Josiah take that shot 10 times out of 10. Good play. One of the best plays I've seen Rick Barnes draw up at the end of the game. Can't complain about it. Great look. Josiah shot well at the end of that game. You take it 10 times out of 10.
Okay. I was writing about Tennessee guards in the backcourt yesterday on Sports Renaissance Man, and one of the things I was looking at was just I love Bart Torvik stuff and just kind of getting an idea of where he thinks the lineups will be and production's going to be, and it's going to be he's expecting a very guard heavy rotation at Tennessee with Fulkerson gone, with BHH at Louisville. Like it's going to be interesting because, like, from my perspective, I would guess right now Barnes will open with Plavsic at the 5, Kamwa at the 4, Phillips at the 3, JJJ at the 2, and Vescovy at the 1. Is that kind of how you think he'll start? I think he's going to start big and then progressively get smaller as the game goes on.
He may. I like the thought of start big and progressively get smaller. Euros, Olivier starting front court, like that just seems like such a Barnes
yes.
move. Like that, going with what he's comfortable with, going with guys that know their job. But I think it would be Phillips who gets cut out of the starting lineup.
Do you really?
That scenario. I just don't see how you're going to start Vescovy point guard. I don't see how you're possibly, unless they add somebody or BJ Edwards just comes in and blows people away. I don't see how Zakai Ziegler's not the starting point guard. Just because look at how much better Vescovy was last year, being able to play off ball all the time than he was his first 2 years. And some of that is as simple as him just developing and him actually having a full offseason that he can be on campus. I mean, his freshman year he showed up in January, and then it was COVID year the next year, so he wasn't on campus. I don't want to discount what that did for his development, but I also think that the fact that he's not a true SEC point guard. He needs to be able to play off the ball to be the most effective, and I don't see how Tennessee doesn't start him at 2 and doesn't start Ziegler at point guard unless they pick up another point guard. But I think there's going to be a true point guard in that starting lineup, and I think that
I just think he worries. Barnes worries about the height there with his 2 guards. I don't know if he trusts starting right out of the gate with Vescovy and Ziegler. I don't know. I'm terrified. Like, Ziegler starting would not surprise me, but it's just, I don't know. There's something about him off the bench, like first guard off the bench, and just the energy that he brings immediately that, I don't know. I feel like you might lose some stuff with Ziegler if he's in the starting lineup versus the first guy up.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get that. And, when Tennessee, Tyrese Hunter, that's the guy who, another kind of connection between Tennessee and Texas, chose Texas over Tennessee and Purdue to transfer from Iowa State. And to me, if you get a guy like that, yeah, that's what you do. You start him at point guard and you bring Ziegler off the bench. But to me, you don't have any other options. You don't have another 100% true point guard that you can trust on the roster. Yeah. And to me, that's far too big of a sacrifice to make, taking Ziegler out of the starting lineup just because of the energy and the juice that he can give you off the bench, which you're 100% right. It's a game changer. I think you probably do lose something if you don't have it. But I still think the lack of point guard depth overrides what you get from him coming off the bench.
I think it's interesting though that they have Bart Torvik has Key as the highest offensive usage guy on this roster this year, which I mean he is the biggest boomer bust guy that might make or break their March run and everything else. Where like that horrible 3-point spell in the Michigan game and stuff like that, where it's like the difference with somebody like him. And he like, will he earn that trust? You don't have to like fluctuate with the Powell and Bailey minutes and figure out who you're throwing out there. Where it's like, if Key being as old, being a veteran, being someone who has proved it in at Indiana State over the couple of years that he can do it, but it's also like he's going to play less. He's not playing 33 minutes like he was at Indiana State. He's going to have to adjust. He's going to have to be off the bench. He's going to have to be a role guy. He's going to have to defend at a high level. That's one of the easiest ways to earn Barnes' trust, is be a high-level defender on the wing. I don't know. I think he's the most fascinating because I don't think he's a starter. I don't think that's going to happen. But I also think a lot of when Tennessee gets bogged down, because there are going to be games where their offense is going to struggle, it's going to be all eyes on him, just getting them out of the mud and getting them going offensively. Because I think if teams have to worry about him, that opens up the Vescovy backdoor cuts, that opens up Sakai Ziegler open, that opens Triple J open in the corner, that opens a lot more for them. That I don't know. I'm very, very curious to see how he acclimates to a smaller role at a high major versus mid major, and how much Barnes trusts him out of the gate, because he might be the engine that runs this whole offense.
I completely agree. I mean, to me, he's the biggest X factor, or the guy I'm most interested to see whenever in October when we get to start watching practice. Because I just don't know what to expect from him. You know, he has the big scoring numbers. He has the shooting percentages that have really fluctuated pretty widely year by year. And to me, I think the big question is he athletic enough to create his own shot in the SEC like he was Missouri Valley Conference? I think that's what Indiana State plays in.
I believe
yeah, I mean, it's a completely different question, and he was able to do it, and that's one of the things that made him such an effective player in Indiana State. But it's a whole other ball game when you're asking someone to do that in the SEC. And go back and look at James Daniels in that 2017-18 season. I guess the first one that Tennessee really took a step forward. He was the leading scorer in the country at Howard. And look, I thought he was a nice piece on that Tennessee team. I think I probably thought he was better than most people did. But he couldn't create his own shot. He offensively was basically a spot-up three-point shooter is what he was reduced to. And I think it's just hard to know how those guys project at the next – or I guess not the next level, but at a higher level. And I think the one thing that you made a good point of you're not thinking about, you don't think it's going to be a Victor Bailey, Justin Powell situation of game by game. You don't even know who's going to be getting the minutes. You think it's going to be him. But at the same time, that was my first thought too, but I don't even know if that's necessarily the case, because you do have Jemai Meshack, who you mentioned the first thing you can do to earn Coach Barnes' trust is to play really good defense. And Meshack's he's gonna have it on the defensive end. He's gonna be bought into that, and he's a guy that with a strong offseason, I think could make a jump and earn those type of minutes. So
he's got
it's
the
gonna
size.
be interesting. He has the size, he has the athleticism. If he can really just gain a little bit of offensive confidence and a little bit to his offensive game, he's a guy that 100% can help Tennessee in a role like that this year. So to me, that's fascinating, and I think you're right. I'm not sure there's another player. Maybe Julian Phillips, just because he's a 5-star freshman, and we know those guys can fluctuate. But when you look at the year, I'm not sure there's a guy that ceiling and floor is more separated than Keys is.
What do you think is the most played 5-man lineup?
I think it probably Olivier at the 5, Phillips and Josiah at the 4 and 3, Santi at the 2, and then Ziegler at the point spot.
See, that's interesting. No Key there. That's the whole thing.
No Key there.
Does he close? Do we think he closes?
He could. I mean, it's a possibility. But to me, I think those are the. And again, I think it's probably Phillips or Key. I think to me, I don't see any way that it's not Ziegler, Josiah, and Santi closing. And I have a hard time thinking it's not Olivier. Maybe Jonas Adu takes a really big step, but I think what Olivier gives you with that spacing and his rim protection, that combination, is something that really nobody else on Tennessee's roster can give you. And to me, maybe, again, Phillips is a guy, like I said, like there's probably a big fluctuation between what his floor and what his ceiling is this season. But to me, I think those other three guys, it's hard for me to imagine that they're winning time more games than not. They're not going to be in the lineup.
There you go. I mean, Bart Torvik has Tennessee as the number 3 team coming into the year. Like number 3, that's pretty wild. Just behind Baylor and Gonzaga.
Yeah, I mean that's Baylor and Gonzaga. We talked about that 2021 Gonzaga team earlier.
Yeah.
Both those teams all year were by far the best 2 teams, and in a rare thing where March Madness went in the way you expected, they met in the title, and then obviously they were, I believe, both 1 seeds last year. If not, maybe one of them was a 2 seed. But 2 of the best programs in the country the last 3-5 years. That's some high praise for what Bart thinks Tennessee has coming back.
Yeah, no, and it's just they're not going to play a lot of young guys. Like I don't think DJ Jefferson and BJ Edwards are going to be a part of this rotation without injuries. Like I think injuries is the only thing that gets them in this fold. And Phillips is like, when your only young guy that Barnes is going to turn to is a 5-star freshman, that's a really, really good spot to be in. If that's it, like you're like, okay, well, I'll play a young guy if he's a 5-star, but like ultimately, like if he's a game changer, but everybody else is going to be a vet. Like this is going to be a very veteran, I know Barnes' system heavy lineup, and I think that matters come March. I mean, look at what North Carolina just did. A lot of dudes who knew the system, knew Hubert, knew Roy, and just been around each other for a long time, and these guys have been around each other for a long time now. So I think it's going to be a very, very good Tennessee team. I think they'll be better than actually what they were this past year. So we shall see. Still a long off season ahead. Ryan, what can the good folks check out from you over at Rocky Top Insider with Rick Butler and everybody else?
Yeah, so a lot of stuff. Just recapping the baseball season, looking at some different news there. I guess the news today is that Ben Joyce's twin brother, Zach, is rejoining the Tennessee baseball program. He was a commit with Ben at Walters State, and I guess what was 2019. He had Tommy John surgery his last year at Walters State, decided to hang it up for baseball, and but no, he's been kind of working back towards that. I think kind of been eyeing a return now for a couple months, and you've probably seen him at some point walking around Lindsey Nelson Stadium. It's not a very big ballpark, but you see him walking around the concourse, and you're like, why is Ben Joyce? Why is Ben Joyce here? I mean, it's his twin brother. He's the exact same size, exact same build. So that's an interesting kind of storyline it will be to watch next year. But no, plenty of stuff putting a bow on baseball season, and then kind of a little bit of stuff looking at the first week of basketball being back for their summer workouts, and then obviously updates on the football recruiting is that world never ends, keeps churning on, and Tennessee misses out on a couple guys this week, but has their eyes turned to what could be a couple more commits in a month or two.
There you go. Ryan, thank you as always. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll be back next week.
Yeah, can't wait to do it.